Sun comes up about 10 in the morning. Sun goes down about 3 in the afternoon.
Hello, I'm Dan Drumheller.
My name is Peter Denby.
I'm Chad Dalton.
Hello, I'm Dan Drumheller, and I'm here with my Yamaha Grizzly 700. It's a 2012 model. Has electronic power steering, fuel injection. My favorite type of riding is uphill climbing, and I also like riding down trails that have lots of water features and like a canopy, so you're driving through a cave where you get all kinds of leaves and butterflies, and it's a really good scene. The general reason that I have this particular ATV is because I like Yamahas. The Yamaha was the first four-wheeler that I ever owned when I was about 12. I had an old Moto 4, and I liked that four-wheeler, and it turns out this Yamaha Grizzly 700 is the largest four-wheeler that Yamaha makes, and so that's what I drive. I'm a big guy, I weigh about 250 pounds, and it handles me pretty well. I have lots of things that I like about this four-wheeler and lots of things that I don't like about this four-wheeler. One of the things I really like about this four-wheeler primarily is reliability. I don't worry about the engine performance on this. I've never had a problem with the CVT belt going bad. I've had really good reliability. The only thing that's ever gone bad on the Yamaha four-wheelers that I've owned are wheel bearings. Sometimes they go bad. We really abuse them. We drive over lots of rocks, heavy gravel, and we really put a hurt on them on climbing. And so once in a while you wear a wheel bearing out. The way to tell if your wheel bearing is going bad is that you'll notice that your hand brakes are starting to get a little soft and you have to pump them up. That means that your wheels are wobbling. So if you ever have that symptom, you know your wheel bearings are going bad. So in general, I have done no modifications to the suspension at all. I haven't added any shocks or anything extra, but I have the front set pretty soft so that if I'm going up a hill and I hit a bump, it doesn't jar me backwards. But the downside is when I go down a very steep hill, it's a little softer, and I have a lot of weight in the front. I carry most of the heaviest stuff that I carry in the front. It makes it excellent for climbing hills. Going downhill is not so bad. The rear I have at the lowest, softest setting as well, and that's fine with me. I like a soft ride, and those settings work out really well for me. So one of the things that we do to the four-wheelers, and I do to this one, is we have lots of modifications that we make. We add lots of things. Some people have boxes that come from Yamaha or come from a custom manufacturing of front boxes. This is an old bag setup that I got off of an old four-wheeler that I used to own that I did not choose, but it just came along with it. And then we added a Pelican case in the middle. The Pelican case is completely waterproof until I drill a hole in it to put wires through this trip. But inside your Pelican case you have lots of little slots for all your electronics and things like that. The main task that I provide on the trip is chainsaw carrying. And so in this far container I have a nice steel chainsaw, and although it is small, it is not the smallest one that they make. There is one smaller that has a single handle that's made for reaching out and cutting tree limbs down, but this is a good one. If you bring a steel chainsaw, always bring a sharp extra blade. And one of the things that's in the future of my supplies is to bring an extra bar, because if you are cutting a tree really far away from everything and you get this bar stuck and you need another chainsaw, you simply disassemble this, put on a new chain and a new blade that you've brought along as spares, and then cut your old stuff out, and so you can have really good reliability. So when we go on trails, we might ride on trails that haven't been ridden in a decade, and they get to be overgrown. And so we don't want our half an hour of exploring to be thwarted by a tree in the way, and so I'll tear down a tree if needed. We also do a bunch of navigation work, and I don't do the navigation setup, but I have the Garmin Montana 650T and an iPad mini with all kinds of mapping programs on that it's all set up by Peter and Chad. But I don't do, I know how to use them, but I don't know how to do the setups. But kind of in a trade for that, I cook. And so that's another one of my jobs on our trips. The rear case is not specifically set up for anything in particular. It's bulk storage. There's jackets and things of that nature inside. There's some cooking equipment in here to cook meals on the trail. And then in my other front satchel here, we have These are MSR fuel bottles, and I have one with 2-cycle engine oil for the chainsaw, regular gasoline, and an extra spare little bit of gasoline just in case Peter makes you go just a half an hour longer than you want to. And then there's a big first aid kit and the tool kit, extra ropes, nylon gloves, things of that nature. So this is my fuel container, and you know this adds a lot of weight to the front. And so having an extra bit of weight on the front makes climbing a good bit easier for me. You know, one of my kind of nightmare scenarios is to flip backwards, and I don't like to do that. And so with weight on the front, I suffer on the downhill, but I have really good success at uphill climbs. I have really aggressive tires that have 1.5-inch tall treads on them. They are Growler Pitbull models 26.5 by 9 R14s on the front, and on the rear they are 26.5 by 11 R14s. And to be honest, when I bought them, they were so aggressive that if you slammed on the brakes, they would roll your four-wheeler forward. They would just extremely grippy. They're worn down a little bit now. The little grooves are worn out. They're really very comfortable tires, very reliable. Haven't had any punctures, and I have hit some nasty rocks with these tires, and it's a surprise that they are not punctured. And they are radials, and I choose radials. They have a really smooth on-the-ride road, and they are really reliable. Some people choose bias. Bias is the other type of tire, and I believe Peter runs bias tires. But I like the radials, and I've just always had radials, and I've liked them, and so that's what I have. And there are a few other compartments around with other gadgetry and radios and things like that, but I'll let them tell more about that because a lot of the stuff is duplicated. I don't want to be the only person that's telling about everything and then have to be duplicated. But one of the things that I really like about this four-wheeler is my fancy light bar. And so I have an LED light bar that flips on only when the high beams are on. And there's a relay set up in there that we wired up a few weeks ago, and a switch on the handle so that you can turn your light bar on and off. And my light bar is the biggest and the brightest and the most fun of all of them. But it was a cheapo. It's probably an $80 light bar from Amazon. I don't even know the brand name, but it's a 24-inch light bar. And that's been a really fun addition, and I highly, highly recommend go get yourself a big LED light bar, put it on there. I've never said to myself, this light bar is too bright.
Cool. My name is Peter Denby, and my role on these trips, among just being the part of the crew that goes and has a good time, is I tend to get sent into things when we wonder where it goes. And I walk up mountains to see if it's worth the effort to get over that obstacle to keep going, and that's a lot of fun. And I tend to share the responsibility of navigation and map planning, where we look on Google Earth and figure out where we want to try to get the next day and find our way there. And I tend to be the adventure seeker, where I drag these guys into maybe a little bit more than they would want to do otherwise, but in general they don't yell at me too badly, and we usually have a pretty good time. This is my 2012 Arctic Cat 700 H1 Limited. Absolutely love this four-wheeler. I came from a 2002 Arctic Cat's 500, and it's just amazing the difference. This has power steering, and the reason that I like this four-wheeler, for one, it's extremely nimble and extremely stable. So it doesn't have a sway bar. This is the year before they started putting disconnectable sway bars on it. And the suspension is four-wheel independent, and it just articulates over anything. You're rock crawling up something, and quite more often than not, all four tires on the ground. It has diff lock, very powerful power steering, and astonishing downhill descent control, where I can let go with one hand on even the steepest of items and not even have to apply the brakes. And as long as it's in low, I quite often have to give it throttle to get it to go down the hill. It's very tough and it's very reliable. I've only had one problem with it, and that is going through deep water, the electric fan would blow the fuse, so I put a resettable breaker in place of that fuse, and other than that, I've had zero issues with it. As far as setup, I weigh 145 pounds fully dressed. I have all four springs on the very lowest setting. and I find that at my weight it does just great. I can move over whatever I need to move over. It's the softest ride possible, but it's not so soft that it's not stable. My modification philosophy with this is the type of riding we do is in the woods, on the trails, up the mountains. We don't really get into a lot of mud bogging, and so my whole philosophy with this is how compact of a system can I have so that I can squeeze under trees, squeeze through rocks, but yet still have everything we need, because we go out for hours and hours and hours at a time. We'll go 60 miles out, and we want to be able to have everything with us. So I try to go with items that are very tough, that are very efficient, that don't take up a lot of space, and that can get us out of what we need to get out of in case there's an emergency, an accident, or just a really tough spot that we have to climb through. The modifications I've made is long. We will start with the front. I put on a synthetic winch cable from Custom Splice. Really like the synthetic winch cable, along with a Haas Fair lead. And with the Haas Fair lead, there's a straight line now for the bumpers. With the old roller fair leads, they stuck out, so if you wanted to climb up something, it would hit. With this, it's nice and smooth, and you can work your way up a big log or something that's in the way. We have a Pelican case. This is a 1500, in which I carry a boatload of electronics that we'll get into probably another video. This is a tablet with Google Earth on it with cached imagery, and I have just a RAM mount connecting that. This is a Rotopax 1-gallon tank with their mount that can get extra tight. Radios, I'll let Chad talk more about radios. I have a Garmin Organ 450 GPS, not as big as the Montanas, but I also take this hiking and other adventures. I like the little glove box compartment in Arctic Cats, and in that I carry cameras and emergency whistle and a backup radio and sunglasses or whatever I might need. I have, this is I think a $40 or $50 light bar by Your Life, and I can put a link in the video, that just works great so far. When I got it, I did reseal it with silicone just to make sure everything was good. I run a GoPro up front. Let's see, what else have we done? I put recoil start on it, and that's something I really like about the Arctic Cat, is you can get recoil start. And we have used that in the past if we've accidentally run down the battery over winching or something like that. This is actually a box for the front of a four-wheeler, but I put it on the back because I wanted a low-profile box, so again, I could squeeze under things. In it, I carry first aid kit, tools, food, recovery gear, winch, snatch blocks, that sort of thing. I have a GoPro on the back. I have a super winch, 3,000-pound winch on the rear as well. The tires that I have on it right now are ITP Swamp Light. No, are they ITP? I forget who makes these. Swamp Lights. I forget who makes them, but they're Swamp Lights, and they're fairly big. They're 27 by 10s up front and 27 by 12s in the back. I really chose these because they had great lateral grip, because quite often we're off camber on a very leafy trail that's very slippery, and we don't want to go that way. So versus having big paddles, these have a lot of little spikes that can really grip in and pull it. A couple other modifications I've made. I put in an Optima, a big heavy-duty Optima battery that I can't quite see, so I'll put a link in the description on exactly what it is. But we do a lot of winching, and when you're out in the middle of nowhere, you don't want your battery to die. So it's a very heavy-duty. I think no, it's not an Optima. It's a Odyssey battery. I have all LED lights in it because I was discovering that the vibration was breaking the incandescent lights, so they're all LEDs. And there's a hose under here that it's a cooling hose that is just a little too exposed for my taste, so I built a little metal shield for it that's proven really nice. I just didn't want a stick to fly up it or up and hit it, or a rock to cut it or something like that. And this is a single cylinder engine, and it can get a little loud when you're really getting on it, and it can get a little hot just because of all the plastic. And so I lined the inside of the plastic with Dynamat, which really quieted it down a lot and cut out some of the heat. So it's great. I trust this four-wheeler over virtually any terrain. It's never let me down. So The only thing I would change on this four-wheeler is I wish it rode just a little bit softer. You get great feedback as it is right now, but there are times when it does jar you a little bit. Compared to Chad's Polaris, for example, his is very smooth. For me personally, the Polaris is a little too smooth, a little too numb, but somewhere in the middle would be really nice if it could just soften up a little bit. And part of that just might just be my weight. I don't weigh enough to really let the suspension do what it's going to do. Future plans, just keep it well maintained. I think I've done everything to it that I want to have on it now, and just keep it well maintained, fluids checked, nuts and bolts checked, wheel bearings, brake pads, just a nice little maintenance routine, and I think it'll get me where I need to go.
I am Chad Dalton, and this is my 2013 Polaris 850 XP Limited Edition with power steering. On these trips, I generally assume the role of communications and part-time video guy. One of the things that we learned early on in our trips was the key to fun times was good communications. We started out with the little Midland handheld 2-watt radios that were very underpowered, and you couldn't hear anybody as you were riding down the trail over the engine noise. We went through multitudes of headsets breaking and just not working very well. So after many times of research and many different radio systems, including chatterboxes and those types of things, we found some amateur style radios. Currently we're running Yaesu radios. We have the VX6s, VX7s, and VX8s. Once we found the radios, the key then was good headsets. After some research, we found some guys that were using heavy-duty gear from Baja Racing. They're generally used out in the Baja races in trucks and Jeeps and that such. They make headsets, helmets, intercom systems. We're currently using one of their helmet kits, and they just came out with a new setup that has waterproof connectors, which we found to be really the only downside to these setups. If they get some water in them, they tend to not work too well. You have to blow them out or use dielectric grease. But now they have a nice little rubber connector over them to hopefully help prevent that. My favorite type of riding on these is generally just what we do. It's mostly trail riding in the woods. I like the nice overgrown-ish type trails that aren't too dusty, too rocky. Up and down the mountains is fun, and along the switchbacks. I really like it when we can find a trail that's got a nice canopy over it, maybe a little bit of moisture to it where you're getting slightly damp as you're riding through the leaves. So I've always ridden Yamahas in the past. I started riding when I was 10 years old. I had a Yamaha 80. Little red solid axle four-wheeler. It was great for when I was a kid. I could get out in the woods and do what kids do in the woods. Upgraded that to a 200 Moto 4, and then eventually ended up on a Warrior. Going off to college, had to get rid of all the four-wheelers because there's just nowhere to ride them. And then several years after college, decided to get back into ATVing. And by then, all of my friends back home had migrated to the CVT style ATVs, and really the leader in CVT ATVs was Polaris. Started out with their snowmobiles, and they just rant and raved about the reliability of the CVT driveline, because that was always a bit of contention among our group was, oh, you're running a CVT and not a clutch transmission, because they weren't reliable when they first came out. So after some research, I ended up with a Polaris 800. It was a great bike. The steering was horrendous. It was way too difficult to steer. It was just very heavy. Suffered through that for several years, and then Polaris finally put power steering on their ATVs. Not only that, they also improved their active descent control. What they had on previously was basically lock up the rear tires and pray, which I did many times here in West Virginia. Now they have active descent control, which works in low gear only and at slow speeds, but basically I can go down a 60% grade and never touch the brakes. The biggest reason why I continue to stick with Polaris is the ride quality. So far, there's nothing that compares to it that I can find. Everybody makes fun of me because it's like I'm riding in the woods on a pillow. and it really is true. I mean, I'm not a small guy. I carry probably another 100 pounds of gear with me. I have the suspension set at about, maybe I'll tick up from midway, front and rear, maybe a little heavier on the rear, and it still rides like you're in a cloud in the woods. I get decent feedback. I mean, with the power steering, it kind of dampens it a little bit, but I'll take that any day for a 7-hour ride, and in this type of terrain, the ride quality is just amazing. When I had four-wheelers before, I did everything possible you could to them, from switching out pistons and boring them out to changing sprockets and gear ratios and shocks and springs. And what I found, it was great for, you know, an hour or two ride because something generally broke or fell apart and you had to go back to the shop and fix it. At my age now, I'm tired of fixing stuff. I just want to go out and enjoy it. So I generally haven't done a whole lot of heavy-duty modifications to the ATV. On this particular one, I had the tires changed before it even left the dealership. On our very first trip out here, on the first day, I put a hole in the stock tires, and I haven't run stock tires since then. The tires I'm currently running right now are the ITP Mud Lights. They're 14s, I believe they're 27s all the way around. The Mud Lights are a good tire, I like them. I don't believe I put a hole in these yet. I'm on the third set actually. These are about ready for an upgrade. I'm not advocating that they're the best tire out there. I'm gonna probably look into different options for the next set. As far as things that I've changed to this bike, it's mostly been additions. On the previous bike, I did change out the clutching. I believe after about 2 trips of doing that, I blew a belt. So I won't be messing with the clutches anymore, but I do carry a spare belt in the toolkit needed to change that. But as far as modifications go to this one, I've added the LED light bar up front. I also got that from Baja Designs. It's a 7-inch light bar. I added in a waterproof, dustproof switch. It is switched separately from the rest of the electrical system. Up front, I switched out the metal cable for a synthetic. It's super winch cable. I have actually that front and rear. I have a Warn 33,000 pound rear winch with a mount from some awesome guy in Russia. He had it shipped to my house in like a week. It's a very solid mount. I enjoy the rear winch because Peter's not the only one that has one now. As far as cargo and storage goes, I'm using a Polaris lock and ride box on the rear. I believe it's like their 2nd gen rear lock and ride box. It's a lower profile, not so square boxy one. I'm actually on the 2nd one. I ripped the first one off on our last trip. Up front I have the lock and ride lower rack, and inside of there I generally carry all the recovery tools that we need. Some winch extension cables, snatch blocks, tree savers, that sort of thing. Up top we've got 2 Pelican 1450s. They're still mostly waterproof even though I poked a few holes in them. They probably survive a Duncan for a couple of minutes. Inside of there carry mostly the electronics, batteries, spare batteries, GoPro remotes, that sort of thing. For this trip we've actually added a new iPad navigation system. I'm not extremely excited about where it's mounted, but it was sort of a last minute addition just to see if we actually like the iPad navigation. I'm running a Montana 650 GPS. It's in a mount. Everything is full-time powered. GoPros, radios, everything is powered off the battery, which is an upgraded Odyssey battery, and it's about double the size of the stock battery. Future plan modifications for this ATV, like I say, I don't really plan to do a whole lot of things to it to really mess up its reliability. Having said that, there has been a slight issue on this trip. But we'll get it back to the dealer and get that squared away. Always buy the extended warranty. Probably future changes, maybe in a couple of years, is whatever the next biggest thing Polaris comes out with. The key to having a successful ATV trip when you're spending many days away from home and base camping at a place that's not yours is to do it with a group of guys that you can rely on. You don't want to go out in the woods with a bunch of guys who are going to leave you on the side of the road with a pile of broken parts or a broken ankle. You got to find a group that'll support you no matter what happens. A group that kind of meshes together. Everybody sort of has the same goals. Everybody's a little bit flexible, even though most everybody's stubborn in some ways. But it's always good to never really go off in a place like this on your own. Like I say, one of my roles here is communications. I do carry a satellite phone with me as well as several cell phones on multiple different providers. We have the amateur radio, so if we need to, we could talk to the local emergency bands, which are programmed in our radios. But it's always good not to go out alone and just be safe out there. Keep your helmets on and keep the rubber down.